Greetings, everyone. I'm excited to welcome Michael Kravshik, co-founder and CEO at LumaQ. Michael, welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, great to have you here. Looking forward to this episode as a fellow CPA, and we'll see why that's important with this episode. But let's kick this off. Michael, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I'll start at the most important part. I'm also a CPA, but yeah, went to business school, did my CPA at Ernst and Young, did the kind of typical external audit path. I ended up moving into internal control consulting, internal process and control consulting for a little bit before doing what every good CPA does when they don't know what to do with their career, which is I went and I got a master's degree in counterterrorism. And that led to a really interesting role at a bank, actually focusing on security with a Y, not securities, which most people tend to think that makes more sense, which is a reasonable assumption. And after that, I ended up getting involved with a very young startup, and I acted as I was called the CFO. I was probably more of an everything other than engineers at that company. And I'm happy to talk more about that, but was there for a couple of years. Unfortunately, that company was not successful, but it gave me the bug to start a company. And my best friend and I decided that we would be silly enough to go on this journey ourselves. And that was almost a decade ago now. So I've been building this company, done a lot of pivots along the way. And now, the company has definitely reached a level of scale. And I can tell you just high level, what do we do? LumiQ is a podcasting platform where finance and accounting professionals, including, of course, CPAs, but also other designations, can get their ongoing educational credits, their CPE, CPD, whatever you call it, through engaging podcasts with business leaders. And so we've interviewed folks from the CEO of Nike to the inventor of Amazon Alexa to just did one with the former CFO of Oracle, all sorts of different wonderful business professionals. And we cover everything from hard skills, technical skills like accounting updates and tax updates, to a lot of soft skills, to a lot of call more like practical skills, how to go through an M&A process, how to IPO your business, a real gamut of different topics.
Yeah, so interesting route with your background because we always, you hear that. Well, what's that path to CFO? You go to audit, maybe go to FP&A, and then do this, but usually not going into security with a Y and counterterrorism. So I haven't heard that accounting path, so that'll be a new one. But appreciate that background. So LumiQ podcasting platform, ongoing CP, CBD credit. And so it's interesting that you mentioned like different types of CPE are just continuing ed credit where it's not just specialized knowledge, air quotes, but it sounds like, yeah, you can do those technical skills as well. So a little bit about it. So tell us like the technical requirements with that. Like, how do you, I jump on CPE webinars, you got to answer polling questions and making sure you're
Yeah.
there and in-person events and attendance. But how do you do that verification that they've listened to the whole thing?
That's right. There are different rules depending on jurisdiction. Like we operate in Canada and the US primarily, but through that, we also have folks all over the world. And there are different, even within the US, each state actually has its own different set of standards. A lot of it can be similar, but there are a lot of differences. Primarily what we try to do is not only, make content that's very engaging, and I should say our mission as a company is to make professional education enjoyable. And if you're sitting there saying, this guy's out of his mind, there's no way that those two concepts of professional education and enjoyment can live together. I beg to differ. And, I'm a nerd by profession, let's call it. I really enjoy learning. And I think it's a real shame that a lot of times learning in the way that we do it has turned into something that is, not a whole lot of fun. And so I don't blame people for that bias that tends to exist. But what I was saying is, well, how do we do that? Well, it's a mix of two things. One, it's the content, but the other side of it, and what you were getting at, is actually the platform and the experience itself. So other than just being, mobile and convenient, we actually have a iOS and Android app that feel very much like a Spotify or, a Netflix or something that you might be used to. We've integrated all of the compliance elements right into the app experience. And so as you're listening to a podcast, quiz questions will pop up that you need to answer. At the end, you need to do like a final assessment in some jurisdictions. In Canada, for example, we need to prevent people from fast forwarding. So there are different things that we do that we just make sure, like, one of the things that's really important to us is that we're not, let's call it, shading the line with the compliance side of things. Like, this is truly supposed to be a platform that allows people to breathe a sigh of relief, that it's all done, it's all taken care of for you. You don't have to think about it. And obviously, if we were not going over and above those compliance requirements, that would give people a reason for pause. And so we even, on the app itself, we've built in a whole tracking mechanism to track everything that you've done. And if you happen to get audited by regulatory body, then we try to make it really easy to just kind of, download all the information that you need to actually, provide the support that you've completed everything that you need to.
No, that's great. Yeah, and it's boy, I could debate CP stuff for a while, but like I know I need 40 hours a year. A little behind this year. Always happen. We know it always happens. We know
I know what you can do about that.
I know right now. And what was the firm, the big four where they fired folks, for watching CP? I think
EY, actually, my alma mater, had some problems with that. And it's interestingly, actually, this is coming up a lot because we've built in more what we call anti-cheating measures within the app itself. So when you get those assessments, we actually have more questions than you need to, and we'll choose some of them. We'll randomize the order. We'll do things like that to try to prevent some of those bad actors from doing those kinds of things.
Yeah, and it's like I don't know the scene there, what happened, but that to me it just shows you just the pressure, especially I'd say in public accounting, like so busy, and then it's like, hey, I've got to catch up on these CP and just that pressure. And it's a lot of hours, but again, I could get up on my soapbox here, but required. And like you said, we want to make learning fun. I love to learn, obviously. I actually have a SaaS metrics crash course that's approved for 3 CP credit. That was like a 12-month process to get that initial,
Well, I think you and I have a reason to talk beyond this podcast.
yeah, applicant approval was not easy, so
Yeah.
but yeah, we've got to make learning easy, and accessible for CP credits for everyone out there getting continuing ed. So let's talk, Michael, some stats and figures. What year did you
Sure.
found LumiQ?
So we founded the company, depending on how you think about when, either in 2015 or 2016. However, we were pivoting through a bunch of different ideas in those early days. LumiQ, as it exists today, really didn't get to market until 2019. So for those first few years, the first probably 6 months, we were trying to validate all sorts of different ideas and constantly devalidating them, which is, why we kept searching for something new. We ended up launching into market in 2016 with a product that was focused on the recruitment side of the industry, something that was really meant to be more towards candidates who weren't actively looking for a job, but I'll spare the long explanation there. We ran that part of the business for a couple of years before realizing that it wasn't going to scale in the way that we wanted it to. And then went and spent a lot of time with CPAs, because the recruitment thing was focused on CPAs as well. And we spent a lot of time with CPAs to try to understand what were the big pain points that they were experiencing in their life and their career. And CPE, CPD continued to come up as just a real sore spot. And so that's when we decided to build LumiQ as it exists today. And as I said, launched that in 2019.
Yeah, interesting. I appreciate sharing that pivot. I mean, that's a big pivot. It seems like, yeah, for
Yeah.
recruiting CPAs to now educate CPAs within, of course, that accounting profession or continuing that profession. So really 2019, you said kind of that first go to market on what the product you have today. And so are you located, is the company located in Toronto then?
Yeah. We're based in Toronto. But as I said, we're kind of North America wide
Mhm.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what's your current team size?
Just under 100 people.
Okay, under 100, so
Yeah.
good amount of folks. And then anything you want to share around ARR ranges or scale of company right now?
Sure. And I don't know. I think I mentioned to you just before we pressed record, we just closed a private equity deal. So we're very happy about that. It's a couple months old. And I should probably get some good guidance about what I should be sharing and shouldn't be sharing. But I can say, we're north of the, I think there's various, what'd you call it? There's various like milestones or gates in that startup process, $1 million, 10 million, maybe a 50 or 100 million, or the next one. We're above that 10 million gate, and still growing fast.
And before we talk go to market for this, the pricing model for this as a CPA, can I just I assume download the iOS app, start listening for free. Do you charge me? Tell us a little bit about monetization.
Yeah. So we do offer like a free trial. So people can download the app, sign up for an account and get either a few credits or a few hours, depending on, again, which jurisdiction, kind of different currencies for CPE. And I keep on saying CPE, CPD because different jurisdictions have different words for it, unfortunately. Lots of, what's the word I'm looking for, like letter salad in the
Mhm.
accounting world. So we do have that option, but primarily, it is a paid subscription. We do sell B2C. You can just go on as an individual and purchase a subscription. And we do that in kind of two different ways. You can either have like an unlimited package for a certain amount of CPE years, or you can buy a certain amount of CPE credits and you still have access to the whole platform. It's just, you use a credit or use a credit here, use a credit there. However, primarily we're selling B2B. So most of our direct clients are accounting firms and industry companies as well. Everything from small business up to enterprise. Like we have something like 46 or so of the top 100 accounting firms as clients in the US. We also have lots of great companies like everything from Pepsi to Campbell's Soup to Discover Bank, clients like that are great industry clients, and their business model works similarly. So either you can buy kind of an unlimited usage seat or a number of seats for your staff, or you can buy a number of credits or hours that all of your staff can eat away at as they listen and consume content.
Yeah, interesting. So the B2B play, accounting firms plus the big companies who have a ton of CPAs, CAs in there, depending on what we're after. So you kind of know, it seems like other than all these big companies, you kind of know your market with the accounting firms.
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit about that B2B go-to-market motion.
Sure, yeah, and I can tell you a little bit about the evolution. I mean, when we launched, we were in Canada, and we focused much more on, I guess we'd call SMB, smaller businesses. Mostly at the beginning was, I guess, your traditional outbound kind of BD effort. Over time, I think we've gotten certainly more sophisticated in the way that we do that, but also we spend a lot of time at conferences. Accountants love to actually engage with you in a genuine way. It's one of the things that, frankly, I love about our market, aside from always being up for a terrible dad joke, which accountants absolutely do love. And now I'm allowed to say dad jokes because I am a dad, but they're just a terribly curious and interested group of people, which is really fun as we're building content for them, because we can, really get into areas that go beyond just accounting, as we spoke about, and really into the business advisory side of things. But I think along with that kind of curiosity, what you see is a real genuine interest in engaging one-to-one. And so we spend a lot of time at conferences as well to drive those relationships.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Yeah, we have to get outside of the cube at some point and attend these conferences. So
That's right.
and so let's switch over to your fundraising journey. You mentioned kind of some
Mhm.
PE activity and, and I saw one press release on funding, and I don't know if in it, I think the amount was undisclosed. I don't know if that's PE or VC related activity, but yeah, tell us just about your current
Sure.
fundraising journey.
So we actually did 4 funding rounds prior to the private equity round that we just concluded 2 months ago. And 2 of those were pre-LumaQ the first one was really in that recruitment phase. The second one was when we were kind of eyeing that pivot towards LumaQ. And the third and the fourth were once LumaQ had become the mainstay of the business and was, at various stages of taking off. We'd never done institutional before the private equity round, all angels, smaller dollars in total. I'm sure I can say this in total, all 4 of those rounds only resulted in $4.2 million Canadian in primary into the business. So for all of your American listeners, that's probably something a little north of 3 million in quote unquote real dollars.
Mhm.
Sorry to the Canadian listeners. Our monopoly money doesn't always get
Very
the
well. Yeah.
yeah, get the credit it deserves south of the border. So we had focused in, I would say in contrast to what was really the prevailing wisdom at the time in the startup community, we had always focused on being cash flow positive and building a sustainable business. Maybe it's the accountant in me that, has a hard time doing anything different. But most of the time, once we kind of got ourselves standing, those rounds were really just to help us continue to grow. So primarily angels. We actually had a lot of CPAs as investors because they
Mhm.
understood the business and they liked the product. And we always tried to bring as many operators as possible into our funding rounds. And we were very lucky. We had fantastic investors throughout that whole leg of the journey that were supportive, many of whom had built businesses before and could act as advisors. And then so we the first three we did on a safe structure, so like a convertible, and then the last of those was a priced round before we did the private equity deal a couple months ago. So I'll stop there. Feel free to follow up with whatever you
Yeah,
got.
interesting journey. And tell us the communications. So your first round was under a different product, the recruitment. So did you go back to that angel or angels or those investors and like what was that conversation you remember to say, hey, like we're gonna raise again or whatever, but it's like, hey, we're pivoting now. You invested in this thesis, now the thesis is over here.
Right. For better or worse, we have always landed on the side of kind of uber transparency. And so we would send an investor update out every single month with, of course, financial metrics and or I should say financial and non-financial metrics, SaaS metrics, as well as financial metrics. But we really spent a lot of time bringing our investors along on kind of the discovery journey that we were going through at the same time. And actually, one of the moments that I think I'm most proud of as a founder is one of our investors who had put in money in the second round of funding. We were getting ready to do our third round. And I called the guy up and I said, "Hey, Don, we want to we're looking to start another funding round." And he goes, "I'm in." And I was like, "Well, Don, I haven't even told you what we're doing and what we're looking to raise and all of that." And he said, he's like, "Michael, I've invested in a lot of companies. You tell me exactly what's going on. I know what's happening. I know you guys are headed in the right way. Like, I'm in. Let me know." And that was the end of the conversation. And so that made me feel really good because it evidenced to me that we had been transparent enough for our investors to feel like they knew what was happening. So that actually it didn't end up being that difficult because all of them were kind of on board, whether cheering us on, helping us out, all sorts of things along the way.
Yeah, no, very important to have those monthly updates so they're not surprised when you come like that.
Yeah.
They're all in. So tell us, so four rounds, about 4.2 million Canadian, and now some PE investment. So what, so we know in SaaS, like in recurring revenue businesses, like they get nice multiples if you got a nice story, nice financial story to support that. And sometimes that PE investment is that big goal that founders are looking for. Maybe it's a complete exit, maybe it's majority investment, take a little money off the table, diversify. So what led to say that next stage for you to take
Hmm.
on PE investment?
Yeah, and I can tell you for sure, like, my co-founder and I are still heavily invested in the company. We viewed it as a couple of different things. Number one, our first investors had invested in 2017. It had been over 7 years. And we felt like, it was time to provide some liquidity for those folks. So that was maybe like, let's call it like a non-business side of it. And look, I'm also, I'll be candid that the element of being a poor, scrabbly founder for many, many years, taking a little bit of chips off the table so that we could feel a little bit more secure was a part of the thinking. But I think the biggest element was there were certain things that were difficult for us to do as a standalone company where an institutional could help. One of which was simply being able to get access to bank credit. A lot of, not a lot, every single financial institution we spoke to, it's a very strange thing to me, and this is where my accountant's brain has trouble understanding the bank's perspective on this. But we were a cash positive, growing very rapidly, strong B2B customers, recurring revenue business, and they would not give us a line of credit that made any sense. And so one of the big things for us was, we want to have institutional backing to be able to have access to capital for two situations. One for like, hey, you know what, our projections didn't pan out. Maybe we need, what we don't want is a situation where, we actually need to start laying people off or something like that, something we've never had to do, thankfully, so far. But also on the opposite side, to be able to grab opportunities when they arise, it was really hard because we'd have to go and raise equity to essentially fund our working capital, which, any good accountant will tell you is the wrong thing to do in most situations.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I've had some Canadian clients and going after debt. And like you said, this invisible border, between the US and Canada, at least just brief experience with looking for debt in Canada, it seemed like very more risk averse as
Yep.
far as providing debt to SaaS companies versus the US in my experience. And it
Totally.
kind of alluding to, it sounds like what you're saying, like you were just having a hard time just getting access to, like yeah, it'd be nice to have a line of credit for working capital needs, or maybe a 3-year term loan, to provide a little growth. But,
Right.
maybe it's just like, yeah, just that not comfortable with that risk profile then.
Well, and look, for anybody that hasn't spent too much time in Canada, it's not only an institutional culture, it's actually a Canadian culture thing. Like Canadians in general, and we kind of self-abuse ourselves with this sometimes, is we are less risk-taking than our lovely neighbors south of the border. And good and bad come with that, right? Like in the 2008 financial crisis, all of our banks were in great shape, and that we didn't have to go through the kind of painful experiences that the US did. At the same time, I mean, if you look at growth and productivity and things like that in Canada, like we're falling behind. And so some of that's cultural, some of that's, maybe bureaucracy. I mean, we could, you could talk for, I'm sure, a year on what those reasons are, but it does exist. And we noticed it as we started selling into the US. Just it's a different, despite the fact that in most ways our cultures are very similar, there is a difference, and it's quite palpable once you start selling into the different markets.
Yeah, it's so interesting because right, private equity firms, they have their preferred lending providers or one lending provider. So they have that relationship and they have developed that
Yeah.
reputation with those providers. So then say you come under their portco, now, yeah, you have access to
Yeah.
that credit and their reputation and so on. So
Well,
yeah,
and
great.
the folks that we ended up partnering with, also brought all sorts of, their experience. This is the first time my co-founder and I have built a business at all, let alone a business of this kind of scale. And we know that to get from this stage to the next stage, there is a lot that we're going to need to learn. And hopefully we can skip over a few of those potholes with folks who've seen it, time and time again before, and they can help guide us to greener pastures.
And then tell us a little bit about, so angel investment, so those early rounds, and now PE investment. Any differences going after this PE investment? Any lessons learned that you'd like to share there with with the PE round?
Absolutely, and we don't have nearly enough
Yeah,
time
yeah.
to
Top three.
cover it all. Look, I mean, first of all, just the level of due diligence that you go through. I expected it to be significant, but it's like having several colonoscopies all at once. So I think that probably the best advice I would have given myself 8 months ago is like, if you think everything's buttoned up, you still aren't even close to where you want to be on that side. I think something that gets a lot of focus is the top line valuation. And I think that that's not that it doesn't matter. Of course it matters, but I think that the supreme focus there is a mistake, especially for founders. The structure of the round matters a heck of a lot. And for anybody that's dealt with, pref stacks that have been very, let's call it deleterious to your economic outcome in certain situations, like things like that really, really matter. And so, for anybody that's looking to go down that path, I would really consider whether, optimizing for that valuation number, whether that should be the goal. And I can say, throughout the 4 rounds we did before that, we never optimized for that. Of course, we didn't want to, fire sale the company. We knew what, or we thought we knew what we were worth, and we wanted to get, something that that meant something there. But focusing much more on those qualitative elements than one typically does, I think is a really important thing to do. And maybe the last thing is kind of an addendum to that, which is the people, right? Like, I made a decision to get into the best decision I ever made was who my co-founder was. That's a marriage. And thankfully, two friends getting into business together could go really poorly. I was very lucky that my co-founder is, smart and capable, and we work together in a great way. The same goes with a PE partner, and I'm very early in the journey still with them. But one of the primary things, and all throughout the process, the folks that at Virtue Capital, they're our investors, the folks that we did this deal with, they were at the top of the running for us because just in talking to them, in engaging with them, we recognized a kind of an alignment on how we saw the business, on the things that we cared about, on the maybe what you might call the philosophy about how we want to run the business. And I've seen it in the past, both personally and through lots of other folks that I know, management teams that are running companies who aren't aligned with their investors. And it creates not only a lot of just, let's call it unpleasant experiences, but I actually think a lot of times that's what leads companies to either, non-optimal outcomes or even potentially like really bad outcomes because you're just working at cross purposes with one another.
Yeah, I mean, great points. We know due diligence standards have elevated. So SaaS founders out there, you've got to be prepared. Like you said, it's not just financial, but it's your tech, the code base, HR policies
The
and
person
audit.
that you fired 8 years ago, and do you have the release that they signed? I mean, like level of details that were quite
Oh yeah, IP
substantial.
agreement, IP assignments, all that stuff,
Yeah.
employee agreements, so important. So yeah, if folks out there want a due diligence list, just email me, Ben at saascfo.com. I've got plenty of those. So appreciate that insight. So Michael, at this stage of your business, let's just say north of 10 million somewhere, do you have a favorite number or metric that you're focused on to guide the business?
I mean, this is probably somewhat boring, but I mean, at the end of the day, ARR is our primary North Star metric. Not that everything else can be placed aside because of it, but we've created an ARR metric, and for everybody, I'm sure you've probably talked about this on the podcast. People define ARR in different ways, and so we've tried to define it internally in a way that really speaks to the long-term success of the business. And so that's always our primary metric, with the two follow-ups of being net dollar retention and cash. It's funny because in the private equity world now, everybody's talking about recognized revenue.
Mhm.
And being fully transparent, my relationship with recognized revenue up until this point is don't care one bit. ARR and cash. Those are the things I care about.
Yeah, my AR is a popular one that the founders always mention. So yeah, and then of course retention, super important for the healthy recurring revenue. So especially in due diligence, I'm sure they were checking on that. So,
Oh,
uh,
certainly.
oh yeah, yeah. Now they give me those MR schedules. So Michael, appreciate the time today as we wrap up. What's coming up next for LumaQ?
Well, we are just continuing to expand our presence in North America. We are setting our eyes towards future expansions, both from let's call it type of client, geography, and also product perspective. And so at the end of the day, I'll kind of go back to our mission. We're trying to make professional education enjoyable. And anything that fits into that bucket, specifically for our accounting and finance friends, because we're not going to stray from that group quite yet. That's what we're thinking about 24/7. How do we create more and more different ways to upskill these awesome professionals and help them, achieve the kind of career goals that they have.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. So looking forward to following the journey. So Michael, if listeners would like to learn more, especially those CPAs, CAs, whoever needs continuing ed credit,
Yeah.
where should they find you online?
LumiQlearn.com. So LUMIQ learn, LEARN.com. And if you would like to connect with me on LinkedIn, happy to. I can guarantee you I am the only Michael Kravshik around. As long as you got the spelling right, then you're not going to find another one. So please feel free to add me. one of the things that I should say that we take really, really seriously is talking to our market. It's one of our core values. And most of the time, sadly, people don't spend a lot of time with CPAs. And I think that's been one of the elements of our success is just really caring deeply about what CPAs are thinking about and want to learn and trying as best as we can to serve them, ways to do that, which it seems like you're doing as well. So thank you for being a part of that journey also.
Yeah, trying to educate. So on SaaS finance and metrics. So Michael, really appreciate you sharing your time, your journey. Listeners, check out LumiQ. I'll put that URL in the show notes so you can grab that link.
Great.
And again, Michael, appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Glad to be here.